themselves have more spells to play around with, and everyone has more weapons to choose from. There's also a horse. There are some balance problems, of course, but this is objectively the most complex and diverse the combat in this series has been, and as this is such a long game, with so much combat in it, more options are always a positive. As for the horse, it provides a new way to approach combat encounters in the open world that is surprisingly successful. I say surprising because the track record for pre-existing series successfully adding mounted combat is quite frankly appalling, and I don't think many would have expected the Souls-like stamina-based combat to prove an exception to this, and yet From Software have pulled it off remarkably well. Torrent feels responsive, maneuvering in combat isn't overly restrictive, and overall this adds a new option for players that feels suitably balanced. Mounted combat can feel rather unpredictable, but in some ways I think this works in its favour. In effect, you trade defensive reliability for mobility, while still getting to keep your high damage. This means Torrent becomes a great option for fights where mobility is particularly important, like against dragons, or for fights where you just don't really respect the enemy's offensive capabilities. And if you do want to play it a little safer, or you're just up against more dangerous opponents, the player still has an incentive to dismount and tackle them on foot, where you have your full array of combat options. So, as a way to balance mounted combat, forcing the player to sacrifice defense seems the best option. If you instead had to sacrifice damage, it would just make mounted combat boring, and if there were no drawbacks, players would rely on mounted combat too much, to the point where gameplay would be less varied. The "Are you sure?" pop-up message that defaults to no for resummoning Torrent in combat was a strange choice, but in the grand scheme of things, mounted combat is a resounding success. And so, with more tools at your disposal and more content
Yes, their
ahead of
shitty
you
UI
than
and their
ever
shitty
before,
keybinds.
Elden Ring becomes this near never-ending adventure that takes you through countless stunning vistas that are always accompanied by the strong combat system. And I can respect that. This game didn't need to be this big, and that size does lead to some drawbacks, but it also makes Elden Ring stand out, and there is something special to a game that just keeps going, that whisks you away to this whole other world and gives you so much content that you're able to completely lose yourself in the experience. Unfortunately, as much as I wanted to enjoy that experience, that wasn't quite what happened. Going open world is nothing new. For big budget games, the 2010s may have been the decade of the open world, with many of the best-selling and most highly reviewed titles being as such, and with many of the biggest and most acclaimed franchises becoming open world. So at this point, going open world was a bit like jumping on the bandwagon, and many people have come to be critical of this trend. And then, in comes Elden Ring, and now apparently open worlds are changed forever. Elden Ring has ruined, no, destroyed all other open worlds. Elden Ring has revolutionized the genre. Welcome, comrade, this is the revolution. Now grab your phone and smash that like button on Twitter, because that's how we do revolution in 2022. Take that, Ubisoft. Revolutionizing the open world genre. That would be pretty impressive, if it were true. Really though, Elden Ring's world is the same open world we've been seeing for years. It's designed in the same way, and it has many of the same flaws. Outside of the unique setting, there are only two things which set Elden Ring's world apart from those so many people criticize. The first is good combat, which is not revolutionary, but it is important. Most open world games, regardless of how large their land masses might be or how many side activities they try to cram into them, are still combat-heavy games, and therefore, the better the combat, the better the open world. Elden Ring has good combat. It's like Dark Souls 3, with some extra bits, and that's a hell of a lot more enjoyable than most games manage. But it's not revolutionary. The other thing that sets Elden Ring's world apart is the lack of map markers, pop-up notifications, quest logs, and checklists. Elden Ring's exploration is much more intrinsically driven than most others in the genre. You are still rewarded for exploring, much like in other From Software games, with the usual equipment, consumables and upgrade materials, and as the game is challenging, it means upgrades feel useful. But in most ways, the reason you head out into the world and explore is because it's fun. You aren't doing things because a map marker or side quest is telling you to, you're doing it because you want to. You want to see what's over the horizon, what enemy awaits you round the next corner, and where the next stage of your journey will take you. This is more immersive, as there are less video gamey elements getting in your way, and it's more freeing as you're making decisions for yourself, without the developer's hand constantly guiding you. Basically, Elden Ring has faith in the player that you'll be able to find things on your own, and it has faith in itself that the experience of playing the game is enough of a reward without adding additional extrinsic metrics on top to try to heighten your sense of accomplishment. And this is an improvement. It is insane how many open world games are so extrinsically driven and try so hard to signpost all of their content. There is clearly a problem with this genre. It is a disease, these games are sick, they have lost their mind, these elements aren't needed, they never have been, and hopefully this will actually improve now that Elden Ring has so clearly shown that if your game is actually fun, then all these constant markers and notifications do is get in the way of that.
Yep.
And if you think that is revolutionary, then fine. You are no comrade of mine, but I will begrudgingly respect your different opinion. But this isn't anything new, because older open world games also lacked these elements, and so do certain modern open world games, and this is all just one step in the right direction. Because really, the only thing you'd need to do to turn Elden Ring's world into a Ubisoft one is to add in map markers for its repeated side activities, like the ruins, caves, mines, catacombs, evergaols, churches, Erd trees and world bosses, that would then unlock when you pick up pieces of the map. And then add some way to track your progress that gives you bonus runes for completing things, and voila, you have Ubified Elden Ring. Because the world itself isn't designed differently, it just doesn't include the markers and checklists. This is still a big, pretty to look at world, full of open space and evenly placed side activities inserted to make the world feel full of content and give players lots to do. Elden Ring is just a bit better at disguising this same structure. So what's the problem, you might ask? I did just say better, after all, and in a comparison between Elden Ring and Assassin's Creed whatever, I'd happily be on Elden Ring's side.
Yep.
But that's not what I feel Elden Ring should be compared to, and compared to some of From Software's other games, Elden Ring's open world is lacking in certain ways. For example, you no longer have to learn your way around and mentally map out each location as you explore them, because you have an actual map with a marker that always shows your location. There's also no sense of real danger or tension anymore, because sites of grace are everywhere, and new respawn points called Stakes of Marika have been added, so you always respawn close to where you die, and your dropped runes now come with a map marker to help you find them, and you can ride a horse, making it easy to outrun any and all enemies to just whiz around the map, retrieving your dropped runes, picking up items, or just travelling to your next destination. If you do want to fight enemies, you can, but if enemies want to fight you, they better ask nicely and hope you take pity on them. So there's no longer a sense of real danger, nor do you need to worry about running out of healing, and nor is there any build-up of tension as you struggle to find the next bonfire or reclaim your runes. Because in this open world, you are always safe, and only endanger yourself when you opt into a combat encounter on your terms. There's also no consequences to where you go and what you do anymore, as you can't get lost or stuck, because as long as you're not inside a mini-dungeon, you can just fast travel whenever you feel like it. This difference is even more noticeable on subsequent playthroughs, as when you're familiar with the world's general structure, you can easily collect items like golden seeds, sacred tears, and smithing stones to greatly increase your power right out the gate without engaging a single enemy. The end result of all this is that the gameplay in the open world is less interesting than it is in a more traditional From Software level. It basically just comes down to riding around on torrent and enjoying how the world looks as you move between the more meaningful pieces of content, much like many other open world games. It doesn't help matters that much of the world is wide open space, meaning From Software are greatly limited in the ways they can use space to create combat variety. You see, usually it was the level design that From Software utilised to keep things fresh, by creating ambushes or limiting space so the player has to be careful with their weapon swings and dodges, or using verticality to create areas the player can fall off, or hiding enemies and traps around corners and out of sight, or adding in environmental hazards, and so on. Meanwhile, in a wide open space, you can't do any of this, so From Software instead resort to throwing mini-bosses or just very strong normal enemies at the player ad nauseum, as these become the only way they have left to actually create challenge. This comes at its own cost, however, as it leads to repetition and, quite likely, boss fight fatigue. Ask many From Software fans why they like these games, and the boss fights will be a common answer, but as with most things in life, they are still better in moderation. Elden Ring ignores this. There are 157 boss fights in this game, and 237 encounters with a boss or enemy that sometimes shows up as a boss. That is quite a lot. By comparison, Dark Souls only has 26 boss fights, and yet I never thought it was a game which needed more, because each one of these encounters feels like a memorable event. And this is even true for a boss that is incredibly easy, because this lack of difficulty still at least makes this fight feel distinctive within the context of the rest of the game. Yes, sleep easy, Pinwheel, no one is making fun of you today, for once. Of course, we do have to be critical of Dark Souls for its use of repetition, as the Asylum Demon actually shows up again, not once, but twice, meaning, really, there are only 24 unique boss fights in Dark Souls. This is something many people have harshly criticised this game for over the years, as I guess everyone agrees that each boss fight should really be completely unique. Meanwhile, Elden Ring has 9 unique bosses. Renala, Radahn, Rykard, Malenia, Malekith, Radagon, Fire Giant, Placidusax, and Sir Gideon Ofnir the All-Knowing. There are 157 bosses, and just 9 of them are unique. If you're curious, the average reuse rate of boss-type entity is 3.89. That is how many times you fight each boss enemy on average, and that number is quite frankly far too high. Even if the average player won't encounter every boss on a normal playthrough, they will still encounter too many, and too much repetition. It is almost unavoidable when there is this much of it. Now, to be fair, Elden Ring has many fantastic boss fights, and when considered in their totality, the number and quality of this game's bosses is incredibly impressive. But that doesn't change the fact that the game's structure, with its high frequency and repetition, acts to diminish these boss fights to the point where they quickly stop feeling special. This could be improved if there were simply less, and no other change would be needed. Just take an eraser and remove around 50 of these less impressive encounters, and then remove the boss health bar of a few more who don't deserve it, and then let the remaining 70 or so shine so much brighter as distinctive, unique, and memorable events, just like boss fights always were in the past. 70-something would still be a lot, and surely this would be enough. This problem isn't unique to the bosses, however, as the same criticism can be made about the side content, such as the caves, mines, catacombs, and everjails, which likewise include a staggering amount of repetition, from enemy types to boss rooms, layouts, and other commonly used assets, making them quickly feel repetitive and uninteresting. There is no reason an open world needs to be absolutely packed with things to do, and so many open world games do this to their detriment, even the better ones. Skyrim has far too many dungeons to the point where it undermines the believability of the world. Breath of the Wild has too many shrines, making them feel repetitive. The Witcher 3 has too many points of interest, making completionists go actually insane when they get to the waters of Skellige, and so on. Yep. This feels a bit stupid, as developers do more work to make their games worse, and Elden Ring is no different. Clearly, there must be reasons these games are designed this way, and I can only conclude that developers are so scared of their worlds being called empty that they go too far in the other direction, even when it comes at the detriment to the overall experience. Either that, or these games are simply designed for the type of player that doesn't want to explore, so that even those who rush through the game and only engage with a small amount of optional content will still discover lots to do. This is particularly frustrating when it comes to Elden Ring, however, because if there is one developer you would expect to not care about making their worlds feel arbitrarily full, or trying to appeal to less engaged players, it would be From Software, who have a well-established history of allowing secrets to feel secretive and not caring about whether players find everything, as well as rewarding players who do take the time to thoroughly explore their worlds. In Elden Ring, however, it feels more like you're being punished for thoroughly exploring because of the quantity of repetition. Still, I'd be willing to overlook a lot of this repetition if not for another problem it creates. After all, From Software clearly wanted Elden Ring to be a huge game, and as I said earlier, that is something I can respect. Creating a game of this size means reusing certain assets is almost inevitable, and it's not like other open world games don't reuse their fair share of content either. But again, this isn't a question of other open world games, and one of the main things which has always made From Software's worlds stand out is how cohesive and realistic they seem. These are places where every single enemy and item seems like it exists for a specific reason, and where game design always seems to be informed by the logic of the world. And then you have Elden Ring, which has 49 minor dungeons, where every single one of them has a boss in their final room guarding a single piece of treasure, and everything about this just screams, this is a video game. That these are pieces of content designed from top to bottom to specifically meet the needs of a game, and not as a reflection of what this world would actually be like. That is why they are evenly spread out across the world. That is why assets are repeated so much. That is why there is always one boss fight instead of 0 or 2. That is why the boss is always in the final room. That is why there is always one end piece of treasure. That is why there is always one site of grace at the start and one teleporter at the end. And that is why these places ultimately exist. And to me, this feels incredibly artificial. No boss that comes at the end of a cave or tomb will ever be impressive, because they don't feel like an actual part of the game's world. And completing the same short cave that I've already completed 10 times before doesn't create any real build-up. And defeating them and continuing on my journey doesn't have any sense of genuine meaning. Also, I don't understand how some of these bosses even got here. The magma worm, or the falling star beast, literally cannot fit through the earlier parts of their cave, and don't even get me started on Estelle number 2. And it's not just the minor dungeons where repetition harms realism. There are so many repeated bosses in this game that even entities as unique as the demigods aren't immune from it, as we see with Morgott, Mog, Godfrey, and Godric. I mean, what exactly is a Godfrey the Grafted? This feels like walking into a Lidl and seeing an off-brand copy of one of your favourite products. All I can say is thank God there's no Melanio Blade of Michaela skulking around in a cave somewhere. Not all repetition is unrealistic. I have no problem with there being multiple Night Cavalry or Erdtree avatars, because these seem like beings where multiple versions of them might exist. But there is so little in this world that is allowed to be genuinely unique in a way that just screams classic open world developer desperate to squeeze out every last bit of value from any and all assets. The thing is, once the illusion of the world starts to crumble, it can be hard to keep giving it the benefit of the doubt instead of seeing more and more areas of artificiality. Maybe my standards are too high, but these are standards created by From Software's other games, and I didn't realise that going open world would mean they would have to be discarded. And that's what seems to have happened with Elden Ring. The fear of a franchise going open world is that it results in its core appeal being diluted to fit into a bigger area across a longer playtime, with the only real benefit being an increase in spectacle from travelling around the world and enjoying how it looks. And that describes Elden Ring perfectly. Luckily, however, Elden Ring is not just an open world, and the game's 6 designated legacy dungeons, as well as some of the denser underground and optional areas, still capture much of what the open world loses. All of these legacy dungeons are high quality, but Lindell in particular stands out as maybe the single greatest area From Software have ever created.
Yep.
It looks incredible, it communicates a strong sense of history and lore, it is deeply non-linear, and it is massive in size, particularly if you also include the sewers below. Here it feels like you're not just fighting strong enemies as you ride around, but are actually exploring an entire city bit by bit, where you have to be careful and methodical, and you feel fully immersed, and it is fantastic. Stormvale Castle wasn't far behind either, particularly as it was the first place I went to in-game, which led to it being the only time that I really felt the pressure of needing to preserve healing and care about taking damage. The other Legacy dungeons all have many positive qualities too, although I did completely miss Volcano Manor on my first playthrough because I never found the entrance. In the end though, these Legacy dungeons ended up saving Elden Ring for me, and without them, I cannot imagine how hollow the open world experience would feel on its own. And yet, at the same time, I can't help but wonder what this game would be like if it was all Legacy dungeons. You know, if there was more of these areas and they were all interconnected seamlessly in a way that provides lots of non-linearity and
like
loops
Dark
back on itself as you progress through the game. You know, like Dark Souls 1, but bigger and with better graphics. Elden Ring benefits from having a larger budget and longer development than From Software's other titles, as well as from being able to iterate and learn from previous games, but the open world itself just doesn't seem to have added much to the experience, particularly when you get to repeat playthroughs. Maybe I would feel more charitable if it felt like the open world had taken more risks. For example, I have been waiting years for a developer to finally have the balls to not show a player marker on the map so that players must orient themselves through visuals alone. This would require the world to be designed in a way that provides helpful visual references for players to use to orient themselves, you know, something like having a great big tree in the middle that players can always see. But the benefit would be a more immersive experience where navigating the world involved genuine engagement from the player, just like it used to. In the end though, I don't think there are any real risks taken by Elden Ring in its world design, and instead, much of it is just copied from other games in the genre, including, unfortunately, some of the problems. You could say the open world was worth it because it looks good, but the Legacy dungeons don't exactly look bad. And you could say the open world is worth it because it gives players more freedom, but I'm not actually sure if overall that's really such a good thing, because Elden Ring's freedom has some pretty severe consequences. Overall, I found Elden Ring to be too difficult. The first thing I did after the opening is head to Stormvale Castle, because that was the advice the game gave me, and in my time with From Software games, I have learned to never ignore some free advice, as you don't tend to get much. At Stormvale, I encountered Margit, who I found frustratingly challenging for the game's first boss.
I did not.
It took me a little over 1 hour to defeat him, during which I never once considered that this was the game's way of telling me to go somewhere else and come back later when stronger, because the game had explicitly told me to come here, both through NPC and the new Light of Grace system, and so instead I thought to myself, I must be a bit rusty at these games, because I'm sure the first boss isn't usually this hard. Afterwards, I proceeded through Stormvale and found it to be challenging, but not overly so. Godric was similarly no pushover, but considerably easier than Margit, probably because I had gained quite a few levels through exploring Stormvale. Before continuing further, I decided to explore Limgrave, which I found to be a bit too easy, almost as if this content was meant to be completed before Stormvale. Then I found Siofra River, which was a fantastic moment of discovery, and was about the right difficulty, being challenging without seeming unfairly so, and then I proceeded to Liurnia, which again seemed well balanced. Then, after some thorough exploration, I moved on to Mount Gelmir, assuming that's where the game wanted me to head next. This seemed fine, until I met the full-grown Spaceball, who destroyed me. The problem was that getting hit a single time would always dismount me, and after being dismounted, my damage seemed incredibly low, while the beast damage was very high, with some attacks killing me in one hit, even from full health. After over an hour of attempts where I had barely managed to push the beast into its second phase, I decided this is not right, and that this is clearly an enemy put here to tell me I'm too low level to complete the rest of the area. This isn't actually true, as this is just an unusually high level enemy, and you can even just go around it to do the rest of the zone. But this is what I assumed, so off I went to the other area an NPC had told me to go, Caelid. On arrival, I found I was cutting through bosses rather easily, making me think, well, fuck, I've accidentally overleveled by coming here too late. But then, as I explored a little further, sticking to the north as that seemed like the best way to head first, I found the game suddenly became a lot harder. In fact, I found an exact replica of a boss I had just killed only a little earlier and a short distance away, and yet this time it was hitting like a truck and had 4 or 5 times as much health.
I remember that.
This seemed very strange to me, as this was the same enemy in the same area. And then, eventually, just like with the Falling Star Beast, I got stuck on another boss, this time the Godskin Apostle.
This one I just one-shot.
This was again frustrating because I didn't feel like I was playing that badly. I was dodging, punishing,
I think
improving,
you are.
but it still wasn't enough. The numbers just seemed to be stacked against me, with the boss doing too much damage and having too much health. And so, after 1 hour of never coming close to a kill, I gave up.
Oops.
At this point, I couldn't understand why the bosses within a single area were so vastly different in difficulty, but I decided I didn't want to get stuck again just yet, so I went looking for somewhere new, which led me to the south of Limgrave and the Weeping Peninsula. I figured as this was a completely separate area and no one had hinted that I should come here yet, it's probably going to be an overly difficult endgame zone, but then I found it was the complete opposite. Turns out you're meant to come here before Stormveil, meaning I was so overleveled that every enemy I encountered simply melted before me. Sometimes I did still press the dodge button, but it was only out of a sense of politeness to my foes because I certainly didn't need to use it. On this peninsula, I also found many healing flask upgrades, which was something I really could have benefited from gaining earlier. Still, with this major healing boost, I headed back to Caelid, killed Radahn, who I was able to DPS down so fast he couldn't enter his second phase, thanks maybe to a lucky stagger, and yet other minor mini-bosses in this area still destroyed me, which felt odd, as Radahn seemed like he should have been powerful, but was instead weaker than a lot of the other bosses here. Still, from here I proceeded to the Altus Plateau, and then Lindell, which both seemed too easy again. And then I went to the sewers, which were more challenging, and then the mountaintop of the giants, even more challenging, and then I took my new medallion to find the consecrated snowfields and the Halig tree, which were even more challenging, and then, finally, I reached the bottom of the Halig tree, where I stayed for many, many hours.
I am Melania, Blade of Mikola. And I have never known defeat.
Now, hopefully you're still watching the video and haven't been bored away with so much recounting, but I do have a reason for going into this much detail. You see, I played this game blind. I avoided every piece of information, every discussion, every review, every meme,
me too.
all to try and have a better experience with the game. I did this for other From Software games too, although the one exception was actually Dark Souls, which was the first game I played and which I found so intimidating that I remember checking several things online about where to go and when, as well as how to upgrade weapons and things like that. That said, I didn't look up everything, not even close, and even then this was something I tried to avoid to create a better overall experience. Anyway, after completing Dark Souls and gaining greater confidence in both myself and, more importantly, in From Software, I then resolved to play future titles with as little external information as possible, and I did. This led me to missing a lot of content on my first playthroughs, including the entirety of Bloodborne's DLC and Cainhurst Castle, the Nameless King and Ancient Wyvern in Dark Souls 3, several endgame bosses in Sekiro, and Dark Lurker in Dark Souls 2.
I would say me
In
too.
fact, I've still never found
much
Dark
exactly.
Lurker. Where is he lurking? Maybe I will never know. The point is, there is obviously a downside to playing these games blind, most clearly shown by how you can miss so much content. But I still believe this is the objectively best way to play these games,
Me too.
if you can. It results in you being so much more immersed and absorbed in these worlds.
I like
There's
this
a much
part
stronger
of it.
sense of
I think this
accomplishment
was the
from doing
strongest
things
part
on
of
your
the
own,
video.
and certain moments of discovery you get to make by yourself can be amazing. This is the best way to play, or at least that's what I thought before playing Elden Ring. My first trip through the Lands Between felt like a constant yo-yo between being underleveled and overleveled, despite my best efforts to avoid this. This didn't ruin the experience, but it did harm it. I don't want to win fights solely because I'm overleveled, as that's boring, and I don't want to lose as a result of being underleveled. It's frustrating. I also don't want to obsessively try to manage my character's level to always ensure some correct amount of difficulty. Really, I just want to play the game and become immersed in its world, not fixate on micromanaging its balance issues. This has been caused by the open nature of the game's world, and many have praised this feature, but it clearly comes at a cost. Some have claimed higher level bosses are an effective way to communicate where to go, but in my experience, this wasn't true at all. From Software games are known for being challenging, and how can you accurately determine what level of challenge is intended and what isn't? Of course, if you go to Caelid right at the start of the game, enemies will be so high level that combined with the zone's oppressive appearance, it does effectively communicate that you shouldn't be here yet. But otherwise, things are rarely so clear. Also, running into a high level boss and dying for a long time only to eventually give up and go somewhere else is, to me, a firmly negative experience, and returning when over-leveled to crush them is even worse. The traditional Souls experience of coming across a challenging boss and then trying to learn from your mistakes to eventually overcome them seems far better. Still, Margit I didn't mind, the Falling Star Beast I minded a little, and the Godskin Apostle I minded rather a lot, but this wasn't the worst part. That came from times I found myself overleveled. As I said in the last section, Lindell is amazing, and it was my favourite part of the game, but I was still overleveled, and this meant that the climax to spending hours exploring its streets and working my way upwards towards the foot of the Erd Tree was 2 easy boss fights, both of which I killed on my first attempt. This was particularly disappointing in the case of Morgott, because this was clearly an important story moment, and I didn't achieve victory through anything resembling skill. I got hit over and over, and learnt to dodge nothing, and instead just used my now abundant healing to power on through to victory anyway. You only get to fight a boss for the first time once. Well, I guess that's not really true for most bosses in Elden Ring, as you fight each boss for the first time an average of 3.89 times, but in the story, you only get to fight a boss for the first time once. And it sucks to have that experience ruined for you just because you went to certain places in the wrong order. That said, there was still an upside to playing blind, and certain moments of discovery that came from exploring, particularly the world's underground sections, are up there with some of my favourites across all of From Software's games. So there are positives and negatives to playing blind. What's the big deal, you might say? Well, if this tale ended here, I wouldn't be writing all this. But that's not how this story ends, because I did not complete Elden Ring blind. Because I wasn't able to. It was the 14th of June at 7:14 PM when I first met Melania, Blade of Mikola. And it was the 14th of June at 9:31 PM.
First time I fought her,
when
she
first killed
glitched out, which pissed me
Melania,
off so bad.
Blade
I couldn't even
of
tell
Mikola.
you.
And
She glitched out the first time I saw her, and she was invulnerable. And I looked so bad on stream. But then even people in the stream were confirming that it was like a glitch, and I was like, oh, okay. And then I killed her a second time.
It was at 9:32 p.m.
I have been playing
that
so much
night
New World
that I
at that
realized
point.
something was wrong.
You will witness true horror. Now, rot.
2 hours and 18 minutes is a long time. I'm not sure if any one boss across any of these games has ever taken me that long to defeat before. I think the final boss of Sekiro might be the only one to actually exceed this. Except 2 hours and 18 minutes wasn't how long it took me to defeat Malenia, Blade of Miquella. It was how long it took me to reach the second phase, for the first time. Before this, I assumed there was no second phase because this seemed rather hard enough. Finding out I was wrong was not a welcome revelation. It was 11:39 p.m. that night when I officially gave up and wrote into Google, Malenia Spinny Attack. So, 4 hours and 25 minutes. That was how long it took for Malenia, Blade of Miquella to end my blind playthrough. I just couldn't work out how to deal with the big spinny attack. The only times I survived it were as a result of getting lucky and just scraping through with a sliver of health, and that didn't work in the second phase because of the added scarlet rot. So I cheated. I looked it up and read a wiki, and through this I learned a method to deal with waterfowl darts. That is the name of the attack, by the way, the attack so many people, including me, struggled with. You block the first hit, dodge quickly into the second, and then do a delayed dodge backwards, or just walk back carefully.
Yeah, it's weird. New World teaches you to do that. It teaches you to weave your, while checking, like, do it naturally without even fighting an opponent anymore. You go, weave, cancel, dodge, fight, weave, cancel, dodge, fight, weave, cancel, dodge, fight, weave, cancel, dodge, fight, weave, cancel, dodge, fight. And that's what he was trying to teach people, and if you don't know it, you'll fail the fight over and over and over again. It's weird, I didn't know until I did Brimstone on New World, which was like before Elden Ring, as I recall. I think it was like the same time. I've been fighting Brimstone was hard. It still is kind of hard. It's like hard if you, like, I mean, if you aggro like 5 mobs, it can be the hardest game I've ever played, maybe. It's like, it'll just kick your ass. You can't aggro 5 elite level 65 mobs. They'll just kick your fucking ass. Like, you know, you can fight them. You might even be able to kill 1, 2, but eventually they'll tap you out. Because there's just you're not designed to lose to those. Like, you can handle 1 or 2 of these, but 5 of these, these tigers are a good example. Like, 5 of these all at once would just kill you. You can do it, but it's unnecessarily stressful. You know? I'm talking about level 65, not level 58 like these. I make this guy look easy because I'm 7 levels higher, but like, yeah. Yeah. Oops. You know, it's weird. You're hiding the sound in the background, which I don't like. Yeah, mute the combat music, please.
To avoid the third. Most people don't use a shield for the first part, and instead either try to stay at range during the times they think this attack could happen, or just use a specific art of war called Bloodhound Step to dodge it. Using a shield is not ideal, as to block this successfully you still need to be some distance away when the attack triggers and to have near full stamina
I
for your
hated
block
this
to not be
fight.
broken.
This fight pissed me off so bad. I remember this stupid ass fight now. Like,
And outside of this single attack, a shield is completely useless because Melania heals when she hits you, even when you block, meaning you're sacrificing a lot of DPS just to block a single part of a single attack, and even that blocking is unreliable due to distance and stamina requirements. However, my playstyle involved staying close to enemies, so trying to stay at range for an attack that can't be predicted seemed impossible, and using Bloodhound Step is something I never could have discovered on my own, so I felt like it would be wrong to use it. Of course, I'm not sure if I ever could have worked out the block, fast dodge in, slow dodge back methods on my own either. It is a very specific set of moves the game is forcing the player to perform, and I had already spent over 4 hours without developing the slightest idea of how to deal with this attack beyond frantic dodging while praying for good RNG. I would love to know how many hours this fight would have taken me if I hadn't looked this information up, because I assume it would be quite a large number. Still, I do know how long the fight took with this knowledge. My final try of the night ended at 1:42 AM, at which point I went to bed. At 11:14 the next morning I was back at it again, and it was 10:01 PM on June the 15th that Melania Blade...
he spent 12 hours on a boss? He spent 12 hours on a boss. You're just bad. I can tell you what your 3 problems are, but I just didn't want to act like a superior asshole. Okay, first of all, you have to have 48 vigor. You have to have it. You can't put any points in anything else. Trust me. You have to have 48 vigor. I didn't know till I fucked up the first time. But you have to have 48 vigor, or you just get one shot by everything in the game, including her. And that's why you die for 12 hours, trust me. They want you to bang your head and try and play the game all over again. I know because I did. I just started grinding souls. I thought souls would fix the problem. They wouldn't. What it actually was, well, I mean, they did when I figured out it was that I had to respec and do vigor. When I respected and did vigor, I was like, oh, this game's totally playable. It's fine. Plays like New World, you know? It's not overly hard. It's, you know, you might die, but it, you know, it's not going to punish you. It's if you spec right and you love the game and you do vigor right, you don't bang your head on one boss. You go exploring somewhere else when you can't do a boss. And get used to killing BAMs for a lot of souls. Like right before Fire Giant, I couldn't do Fire Giant, so I killed the giant crows for like a day. It was a lot more fun to kill the giants and the crows that were fighting each other all day, like doing the BAMs out in the snow world outside of Fire Giant and stuff. And like they were like why do you suck dick on the Fire Giant boss so much? And I was like, well, because I don't do any damage. I put 48 points into vigor, so now I've got to keep earning points to put enough strength to be able to kill the Fire Giant. And they're like, you're right. You're like right close to the end, you know. And you had the mobility with the claws to outlive him. And the same problem existed when I went to the last boss. I got help from a friend with the last boss, because I was like, oh god. You see, I can weave these attacks in a way where even the AI can't really handle it, because it is actually weavy. It's like they want you to weave stuff, so you have to get the keybinds right. Elden Ring's no different. You have to get the keybinds right for Elden Ring too. It's so annoying. It took me a long time. It's like a science to me. My job is a science about getting keybinds right. I swear to God. Like, I think about it all the time. Most of the time, I'm thinking about my keybinds and how they're not right, because they make the game so bad that you need to be able to do all of the moves, just like Arena, just like WoW Arena. It feels like WoW Arena when I'm fighting in this game. It feels like WoW Arena, like I'm fighting a rogue over and over again. Each mob feels like a rogue, and I'm on a Mistweaver monk, And I can't let the rogue touch me. It'll just hurt me too much, you know? So I come in and I open up a dragon kick, right? And I close. And I go, da, da, da. And I roll, weave, and run, blah, blah. Bleed open. Move, iframe. Can't do it. Skin him while I can, right? I don't want to be back here again. And I come back here and I can just move forward after I skinned him. See, and he does, like, no damage to me. Because I'm just weave. I miss Weaver very bad. You know, I quit World of Warcraft because, but you know, I never really did like Classic. But I actually love retail. I love retail WoW. Maybe I'll return to retail WoW and do a whole nother goddamn Mistweaver. Because, I mean, I don't know. I like Drakthir Evoker. That was pretty fun. I was enjoying my Drakthir Evoker. But getting the eye level up, I mean, yeah, what's the eye level up to now? It's probably so high. Don't they just keep raising it? I think they do. They just, every season, they just keep raising it. I wonder, like, now there's probably enough content in retail WoW to keep me busy for probably like 2 or 3 weeks. Because I actually really enjoy Drakthir Evoker and Mistweaver Monk. It'd be fun to get both of them to cap again on a new race. I really wish Drakthir Evoker. I wish Evoker wasn't just Drakthir, because it's a really fun class. The most fun mage I've ever played was Drakthir Evoker. I thought it was the only one that's actually fun, you know. Retail always felt like you could just keep continuing to get better at it over and over on different classes. And the music's generally pretty good. But playing retail makes me feel like an addict. I'd rather play Rust, honestly. At least Rust is still new to me. I have like 20,000 hours or something. No, what was it? We did the math one day. It's like 24,000 hours, I think, in World of Warcraft or something like that. And I'm only at 5,000 on Rust, and I want to keep going, you know? One day I'll be at 10,000. I know I will. The only reason I'm playing this game is because it helps me keep Rust out of my system, you know? Now I'm not even like paying attention to what I'm doing or what I'm supposed to be doing. I suppose I should.
Of Mikola tasted for the first time that which I had come to know so well. This means defeating this boss took me 26 hours and 47 minutes.
26 hours because you're bad, you spec
of which
wrong.
I believe about 12 to 14 hours were spent
I've heard this
actively
video
trying.
before, but I forgot about this
take
part.
breaks for various reasons on the second day. The kill itself took just under 10 minutes, and it ended with me only just surviving. Now, there are many things I could say about this, but I will try to be as brief as possible while covering as many important points as I can fit in. So, overall, I found the experience to be not particularly enjoyable, although it wasn't terrible or anything. As the hours dragged on, I did often find myself reflecting on just how long the boss fight was taking, and just what else I could have been doing with my time instead. I don't have much free time.
Research.
So it did feel a
Research
little
is
wasteful
what
to
I
spend
did,
so
and I
long
figured
on
it
a
out in
single
like
boss
3.5
that soon
days.
just felt repetitive.
Sounds like you spent an entire day on
you may
just a
wonder
single
why I
boss.
didn't just give up, or
You
even
talked about
use a more
research, but you
meta
didn't do any
approach.
good research.
But in my defense,
At
I had
all.
no idea the fight would take this long.
Nope.
If I had known, maybe I wouldn't
That
have
fight
bothered.
took me
Or maybe I would have used a more meta
an
build,
hour, I think?
but I
2
didn't.
hours?
Also, there were plenty of times I came relatively close, even after just a few hours of attempts, so in a way it made sense to keep trying. Lastly, there was probably a little bit of pride involved. The game had presented a challenge and I wanted to overcome it, and in previous From Software games, this feat had always been made very achievable if you just keep
This
trying
client
and
is
try to
playing
learn
well
from your
with
mistakes.
others, like really well.
You may also wonder why I didn't experiment more, as maybe it was my build or playstyle holding me back.
Like just
But
as good as Rust
I did
now.
experiment. I tried positioning close versus keeping at distance, being aggressive versus being more patient, using a one-hander with shield versus two-handing and trying to switch at the start of waterfowl, dodging specific attacks to the left versus dodging to the right, and all sorts of other little tweaks. I did my best to experiment and to learn, but in the end I found Malenia to be a rather...
Maybe I should retry Naraka Blade Point again. I didn't like Naraka Blade Point, though. The kids are playing Naraka. I know they are. It's a top 10 game. I wonder if it's good. I mean, I don't know. I didn't like it when I played it. I was like, yeah, this doesn't speak to me, really. It's weird. Okay, what is it that I do here? Oh, south, okay. I hate how the roll cancels it.
a poor teacher. And I did consider changing weapon, but I had no idea what other weapon might be better, and the more time I spent with my axe, the more I worried changing to anything else would force me to have to relearn all the timings and windows I had gotten used to. In many ways, being stuck on a boss fight is actually one of the least appealing times to go find a completely new weapon and playstyle. So, in the end, I stuck with my axe. It had worked on every other boss after all. That said, after spending more time with this game, I do think experimentation with different weapons is a good thing, both for increasing the player's strategic options and for providing more gameplay variety, making me think that Elden Ring should have been designed to try to encourage this. As it is, weapon upgrades require specific materials, and this often ends up limiting the player's ability to change weapon without downgrading in power, particularly for any weapons requiring normal smithing stones, which the game is incredibly stingy with compared to somber ones. So I think a much better system for Elden Ring would be to instead upgrade the blacksmith's tools with smithing and somber smithing stones so that the player can just swap weapons freely. Upgrading individual weapons is tradition in these games, but in such a big game with so many different weapons, this doesn't seem like the best fit anymore. On my second playthrough on a fresh character, I killed Malenia using the Bloodhound Step Ashes of War. alongside some claws I found in Stormvale Castle, which I thought might make me look cool. This second time was far easier, taking me just under 1 hour, and it did feel satisfying to get some revenge, even if using Bloodhound Step to deal with Waterfowl Dance does feel rather cheap in how drastically it lowers the difficulty. The main emotion I felt on killing Malenia the first time was confusion. Why did this take so long? How much of this is me and how much the boss? What were other people's experiences with this fight like? What was the intended experience From Software were trying to create? I also felt a little concerned over any remaining bosses because I wasn't sure if they were going to be even harder. Luckily, they were not even close. Still, I did indulge my curiosity by checking what other people's experiences were like. Mostly YouTubers and streamers, as that's what's easy to find. Watching other people defeat Malenia was a little strange, and not just as a result of some of the more questionable things I saw.
Did I just beat Malenia and show my dick on camera?
What I learned through this was that people do different things, but most people use the summon by way of the Spirit Ash Mimic tier, and even those who in theory had a similar no magic, no summon playstyle to me seemed to approach the fight very differently to what I did. I think this is best displayed by Asmongold, who killed the boss in what I consider to be a rather impressive 2 hours and 20 minutes. His playstyle involved two things, running away and using jumping power attacks, and this seemed to work well. Unlike me, he didn't try to dodge Malenia's attacks outside of getting space to run away, and he didn't use a single non-jumping attack. He exclusively jump attacked from start to finish. It turns out jumping power attacks are very meta for strength builds, to the point where some players, like Asmongold, might use them exclusively for certain fights. These jumping attacks have several advantages. They provide fast gap closers, give you iframes on much of your hitbox, do high damage, do high amounts of stagger, and do considerable posture damage, which eventually grants you a stance break and critical
I don't
hit.
use them at all. I don't use jump attacks at all. Jumping is not attacking.
Jumping power attacks are strong, but
I'll do it when they're aerial. I'll do it for aerial mobs, but I won't jump attack. If you're jumping, you're not attacking. I think he took longer on that boss than I did too, which is weird. Some of the bosses I didn't have trouble with at all, and I think she was one of them. It's because I had the claws. The claws made her so fucking easy, as I recall. The claws make a lot of the game really easy.
But I never knew that. Now, in Elden Ring's defense, there is one pop-up message during the tutorial which mentions jump attacks alongside charged attacks as a means of stance breaking, so the game does tell you they exist. In my defense, you can't see posture damage, and to go alongside this brief pop-up, the game only provides a basic enemy who doesn't even react upon receiving a jumping attack, which doesn't do a very good job at communicating that this is an important or even useful part of your toolset. Keep in mind that jumping attacks have been a part of these games since Dark Souls 1, and they have never seemed very useful in the past.
Never
so
before.
I never thought to start using them now. This may be a
I would
thing.
have thought to
Having
try
another
it,
tool
but
at
I didn't use
disposal
it
that
to
you can
use it to
strategically
fight
employ when it fits a
boss.
specific situation is a big positive, but I don't think I would enjoy playing through the entirety of Elden Ring doing nothing but jump attacks. To me, that would make the gameplay less varied and ruin some of the
That's not what he
immersion,
did. He's
even
better
if it is
than
a
you.
more effective way to play. So maybe I was actually lucky
Why did I
that
just
didn't
pull
realize
1,000
jump attacks are the meta
gold?
for strength builds.
Okay.
Then again, I spent over 12 hours fighting Malenia, so maybe not. There has been a lot of discussion about the difficulty of Elden Ring, and people seem to be broadly split into two groups.
Yeah, for me it was
On
the
one
UI
side,
and
you
the
have people
keybinds
praising
were the
Elden Ring for the
problem.
way
The
it
rest
has
of it was
increased
fine. The rest of
accessibility
it was good. Oh,
and
and
lowered
the
the high
vigor
difficulty
was
From
stupid. The
Software
vigor
is
thing was
usually known
stupid.
for. And on the other side, you have people criticizing the difficulty for being harder than From Software's other titles and moving the experience towards being unfair or unfun. These two groups would seem to hold contradictory beliefs, as this game can't be both easier and harder, but the reason for this difference of opinion is simple. They are the result of different playstyles. Now, you might think there are hundreds of different playstyles in a game with as many options as this, but really, there's only two which matter. And it's not summoning and not summoning, nor is it magic and non-magic. The two playstyles are following the meta or not.
Or not.
And if you follow the meta, this is quite likely the
It's an easy
easiest game
game.
of this type From Software have ever made. And
It is.
if you don't, particularly
Like
if you go as
me.
far as to play the game blind,
Yep,
this is the
like
hardest
me.
game they've made. By
No,
a
Bloodborne.
landslide.
Bloodborne was harder.
Now,
Bloodborne was
in
far,
terms of
far
boss
harder.
movesets,
No,
these games
Bloodborne
have
was
become
way,
more
way, way, way,
challenging
way
over
harder.
time. Go and replay Dark Souls, and you might be amazed at just how simple and
Dark
easy
Souls 3 was
many of
hard.
these once infamous fights are by the standards set by later games.
Yep.
Enemies attack slowly and predictably, with clearly telegraphed attacks that provide obvious windows for the player to counterattack. But as these games have evolved, boss attacks have evolved with them to try to continually increase the difficulty in proportion to the player base's natural increase in skill. By Elden Ring, this has resulted in longer combos, shorter downtime between attacks, more variable attack speeds to make dodge timing more confusing, and more ranged tracking and AoE attacks. Basically, dodging has become harder and harder, and knowing when to counterattack has been made less and less clear. This has had two major consequences. The first is that as the difficulty has risen higher and higher, it has started to reveal the cracks in From Software's core gameplay. In many ways, difficulty is a lot like pressure, in that you can only turn it up so high before its container bursts. For me, this was Malenia, and I could go into several specific grievances my time with this fight revealed. But to name just a few, when you stance break Malenia, there is a chance that input buffering, which is the way player inputs are queued, leads to you attacking her again straight away, which not only removes your chance to do a critical hit, but for some reason also causes Malenia to instantly use Waterfowl Dance, which you'll then be too close to avoid. She does this every single time you hit her when stance broken, and it killed me every single time. I'd estimate I died 10, maybe 20 times to this alone. Now, some people have been complaining about input buffering in these games since Dark Souls, on the basis that action games should be responsive, and I remember seeing these complaints and thinking that really this was no big deal, until I reached a difficult boss where input buffering repeatedly killed me. Another problem I had was the inconsistency of staggering Malenia, where sometimes an attack would stagger her, but sometimes the same attack wouldn't, and she would cancel straight into a now unavoidable attack. Someone actually made a YouTube video proving this, but the main point is that people need consistency to be able to learn, so a boss reacting randomly to being hit is a problem. A third problem is just Waterfowl Dance. No attack should require such a specific counter, and all this does is exclude many builds and playstyles while making the fight exceptionally difficult to work out without external help. Still, more generally speaking, I think the higher than the game can handle difficulty is why so many people have described Elden Ring's late game as unfair or unfun. It's in the late game that the difficulty really jumps up, and it's here that people start to question why they have to dodge so many times in a row just to get a single chance to counterattack.
Oh, I hate that.
Or why
yeah.
punish windows are so unclear now. Or why the camera doesn't zoom out against larger enemies. Or why certain attacks trigger quicker than the average human
I
reaction
hate fighting
time.
their legs. It's
When the
so
difficulty
annoying.
rises high enough, the cracks start to show, and when the cracks get big enough, it risks bringing down the foundations these games are built on, such as the idea that they are hard but fair, or that if you keep trying, you will improve, or that all weapons are designed to be viable. Still, this is just one of the consequences of turning up the difficulty. The other is that players respond by setting their own difficulty.
My God.
This is what players are doing when they check a guide, or a wiki, or a beginner's tips videos, or they look up the strongest weapons or best builds, or ways to cheese bosses. This is what leads them down the path of the meta. The game effectively becomes too difficult for their standards, so they try to push the odds back in their favour using whatever help they can find. Now, to be fair, this is obviously something that happens regardless of difficulty, as there will always be some players who just want to make an experience as easy as they can. And also, this applies to more than just Elden Ring. However, the problem is that Elden Ring increases the difficulty so much that players feel forced to try to find more meta approaches or rely on other external help, as this can feel like the only way to overcome the challenge. I think this is clearly shown by looking at how streamers defeat Malenia. On people's first attempts, there is a lot of variance between different builds and playstyles, but on their actual kills, almost everyone have resorted to one of a few different specific meta approaches. What counts as a meta approach differs between fights, but in this case I would say Mimic Tear, Moonveil Katana, Rivers of Blood, Bloodhound Step, and possibly excessive use of dual heavy weapon jump attacks.
Which I didn't do.
There are 309 weapons in this game, plus 91 different ashes.
Claws all the way, and that golden sword.
Different spirit ashes. So the
and I like
the
there's a few others. I like the spear. Spear's good.
The same one
I
or
like
two
Rivers
ashes
of Blood,
of war,
but I didn't
and
use
only
it.
one single spirit ash shows quite clearly just how dominant the meta is. There are 1.8 million different combinations these tools provide, so seeing only a handful getting used says something. Basically, if you turn the difficulty up high enough, this is how people respond. Hell, even community legend Let Me Solo Her is still using the single most meta weapon possible for this fight. Clearly, this is not a player who lacks skill, but for Malenia, they still followed the meta. This higher difficulty has caused a fundamental change to these games. Dark Souls was about learning, persevering and overcoming, and this was reflected in both its mechanics and story. The solution to problems in Dark Souls was to keep trying, don't give up, don't go hollow. And the game tried to encourage this through things like deliberately telegraphing enemy attacks so that players understand exactly what they did wrong when they die. In Elden Ring, however, the game seems to punish players for their persistence and tries to obscure information that might help players learn, all while overly rewarding looking up external information. For example, exploring the game for yourself leads you to always being the wrong level and missing side quests. Balance is terrible, making certain weapons, ashes and builds far more effective than others and making many playstyles feel invalid on later bosses. Boss attacks are designed to be challenging and visually flashy, with no care given to how well they communicate information to players. No effort has been made to communicate how new mechanics like stance breaking work, or to teach players their effectiveness. Compare this to Sekiro, which added symbols, a visible posture bar, and specific boss encounters, all to try to help players learn. Leveling up is more min-max focused than ever before, thanks to nonsensical scaling, where things like Vigor might increase your health by only 16 at level 8, but at level 40, it increases it by a massive 48. This makes leveling only Vigor by far the best way to go early, and yet this is deliberately hidden through the information that's available in-game. The addition of Torrent and the open structure of the world makes it effortless to ride around and gather healing and weapon upgrades early if you've checked where they are, while players who travel to areas in the wrong order can find themselves at a significant disadvantage. The most difficult boss fights have been given specific counters that are hard to find organically, like Bloodhound Step for Malenia, the Claw that parries Malekith, the Invulnerability Flask for Mog, and the ability to permanently sleep the Godskin duo to make it a 1v1, and on it goes. You could say that these are different games and that they don't need to be the same, but for some players, the process of struggling, learning, and overcoming is satisfying and meaningful in a way that simply looking up a guide online isn't. Now, I won't try to argue that there aren't people who enjoy looking things up and playing these games that way. For example, here is Noah Gervais describing his experience of using a guide to defeat Melania.
On my second try, on the hardest boss of the game, and perhaps the Souls-like genre in general, I managed to use my toolset to completely min-max my Mimic Tear, so that all of her formidable advantages melted to nothing. I was able to completely shut down and bypass just about every individual element of her difficulty. There are people who would tell you that there is no way that this is satisfying, that it is not a fair fight and therefore not a valid one. I disagree. I don't know if I have ever personally felt such absolute incandescent joy after a boss fight, not across any other From Software games where I fought in a way that was more obviously fair. In my desperate desire to win by any means necessary and avoid being stuck on the 120th hour of the game, I went so far past what was necessary that my Mimic Tear represented a more dangerous and unbalanced...
The problem is they didn't use their brains. The problem was they had rechanged the whole way the stats worked, so that if you don't like spec for vigor right away, what do you mean can't take any more objectives? Oh yeah, we'll fight these. You didn't hit me, so I don't know.
balanced foe than Malenia herself. This, to me, is not a cheese. It is a triumph. Perhaps the greatest triumph of my entire experience with From Software games in general.
So clearly some people get great enjoyment from metagaming, and I think that's fine. What I don't think is fine is creating a difficulty so high that players who don't want to play this way feel forced to, or creating a difficulty so high that players aren't able to learn through perseverance anymore, or creating a difficulty so high that the cracks in the gameplay systems are exposed. And at the very least, this is what Malenia and Waterfowl Dance do, and I think you can make an argument that there might be more offenders than this. Now, surely there must be a point where hard becomes too hard. And have we not crossed it? So, I ask, why does the game have to be quite so hard? Players with the highest skill that want the hardest challenges are basically just the inverse of people looking things up to make the game easier, in that they do specific challenges or speedruns to make the game harder. So having a very high base difficulty isn't really catering to them anyway. Meanwhile, players with the least interest in a challenging experience already look things up to make the game easier, so a game that's already easier surely wouldn't harm their experience. And lastly, players who want to do things themselves, play with their preferred weapons and builds, and learn through failure could then, once again, be included. And by the way, for all the different criticisms I have heard over the years of Souls games, Bloodborne and Sekiro, one thing I haven't heard very often is people complaining these games are too easy. So maybe it's time From Software stop trying to outdo themselves by continually one-upping the difficulty, or if they really do want to continue down this path, then at the very least they need to vastly improve the balance and address certain gameplay problems so that these games can actually cope with this ever greater pressure the difficulty puts on them. If they don't, the meta will only become more and more dominant as more and more players come to see this as the way these games are meant to be played, while those who ignore the meta get punished more and more heavily, and apparently even mocked. There are a lot of things you could make fun of Elon Musk for, but one thing you can't is his Elden Ring build not being meta enough. And yet, Elon Musk's only slightly unusual build led to 20 plus articles, multiple YouTube videos, and thousands upon thousands of tweets, all about how stupid he is for playing the game slightly off meta, how dumb this is, how this is apparently disgraceful and offensive even. But I guess this is just what inclusive and accessible difficulty looks like. Thank you, From Software, what a great improvement. Meta is the enemy of fun. It ruins immersion, diminishes accomplishment, leads to less experimentation, less individuality, less agency, worsens any existing balance problems, reduces the sense of a shared experience, leads to arguments about the correct way to play, and just shits all over what should be an incredible gaming experience. Some games are about min-maxing, but this is not one of them. Some games suffer little if you look things up, but this is not one of them. And some games are competitive multiplayer experiences where there will always be a focus on the meta as players need every advantage to compete. But this is not one of them. I have seen the meta destroy entire genres. I have seen it bring some of the greatest games of all time to their knees, and I just fucking hate the idea of From Software's future games becoming more and more meta-centric, although seems like I'm already too late. The very final thing I need to address here is the inevitable question that ends up being asked alongside all this, which is, why don't you just use Spirit Ashes? They make the game easier, after all, and you complain the game becomes too hard, yet this is what Spirit Ashes are for. The answer to this is that summoning changes the gameplay to the point where it becomes an entirely different experience, and just because someone is a fan of one type of experience doesn't mean they enjoy the other. In Elden Ring, summons are more impactful than ever before. To some people, using them makes the game more enjoyable, and to other people, it ruins the enjoyment, because these are different experiences that appeal to different players. Many of the things which drew people to these games in the first place and led people to praise their gameplay aren't present when summoning, like the feeling of a 1v1 duel, or learning a boss's moveset, or overcoming a challenge on your own. Some people say From Software clearly intended all players to use summons, otherwise they wouldn't have added them, but I feel it's worth pointing out that From Software have still not bothered to include boss AI for summons, by which I mean bosses are not capable of detecting that multiple opponents exist, meaning they always ignore one person dependent on who was the last one to damage them, leading to very unrealistic and easily exploitable boss behaviour. From this, I think it's clear that the gameplay experience with summons wasn't seen as much of a priority, making it hard to believe that the developers did intend all players to have to use them. Also, the argument that they exist, therefore all players are meant to use them, doesn't hold up, as this could be applied to everything in-game. For example, just because lots of shields exist doesn't mean that this is the developer's way of telling people all players should use shields. If something exists, it's proof the developers want it to be an option, not proof the developers want it to be a requirement. Likewise, I don't know how anyone could claim that Spirit Ashes are balanced. Mimic Tier can solo any boss in the game, and this is after being nerfed. With a meta build, all the player needs to do is summon them and then go AFK. This is quite obviously not balanced, and I also don't see how this can be the intended experience for everyone. Still, at the very least, I hope people can understand how some might not find this very enjoyable. And again, I'm not claiming that no one would enjoy this, I'm just saying that not everyone would. These games have always had summons, and most people have always chosen to play without them. Summoning has always made these games easier, so players have a large incentive to use them, and yet many people still didn't, because for them it led to a less enjoyable experience. You might try to tell yourself this isn't true, and that people avoid summoning because of gatekeepers and elitists, but if you really think that, I would like to ask you, what is it the gatekeepers and elitists do to stop people from summoning? Because when you play one of these games, no one knows if you use summons or not, and there are no negative consequences to using them. Nor are there special perks for avoiding summoning. You cannot upload your no summon playthrough to Tinder to help you find a maiden, nor can you add it to your CV to find a higher paying job. People were freely able to decide for themselves whether to use summons or not, and many people chose not to, because that's what they found more enjoyable. Still, even if once upon a time most people didn't use summons, this isn't true anymore. In Elden Ring, the majority of people do seem to use them, which has led to a bit of a role reversal where now some people have started attacking anyone who dares not to use them for being an elitist or an idiot. But they're not. They are just people who enjoy something different to you, that's all. And if you were someone who considered it wrong to shame people for using summons in the past, should you not also consider it wrong to shame people for not using them now? For many things I've mentioned here, a large part of the problem revolves around how poorly Elden Ring communicates things to the player. Unfortunately, however, this poor communication also harms another part of the game. The Fallen Leaves tell a story, but I'm not convinced it's a good one. I have completed Elden Ring 2 times. I have watched a reasonable amount of lore videos, and I have spent a considerable amount of time reflecting on the information presented within this game. One thing I haven't found yet is any reason the player is meant to care about all this. Now, From Software have become famous for their confusing narratives, but I would like to compare the different openings of these games. In Demon Souls, you find yourself stuck in the kingdom of Boletaria, where demons are consuming the souls of humans to turn them into monsters. Humanity is facing an existential threat, and you become another poor soul trying to fight this. In Dark Souls, the life-sustaining first flame is fading, and it's resulting in humans losing their sanity. Humanity is facing an existential threat, and you become another poor soul trying to fight this. In Bloodborne, you wake up to find yourself trapped in a nightmare where people, and worse, are hunting you in the streets. Your objective is to survive the nightmare, and to do this you undertake a journey that transforms you from hunted to hunter. In Sekiro, you take the role of Sekiro, who has dedicated his life to protecting a child named Kuro. Someone Sekiro has many reasons to care about, like out of a sense of honor, Kuro saving his life, and Kuro being an innocent. And so, Sekiro tries to fulfill his duty and protect him. In Elden Ring, you are a Tarnished who wakes up in the Lands Between, and then sets out to kill every important person here to try to become the Elden Lord. But this is not your war, so why would I want to get involved in it? And this is not your land, so why would I want to rule it? I mean, it doesn't seem like a very nice place. Everyone just tries to kill each other. There is a religious aspect to these events where you were apparently once banished by the light of grace, and now it is welcoming you back and trying to guide you. And it is nice that the light of grace wants me back after banishing me, but why would I want it back? It banished me, and as far as I can tell, I don't owe it anything. In fact, I don't even know what it is. Maybe we are stuck in the Lands Between, but other people do seem to travel between here and other places, like the Badlands and the Land of Reeds, so wouldn't a more sensible motivation be to look for a way off this rather dangerous island? Instead, we just set off immediately to kill everyone. This isn't completely insane, because killing people does make you stronger, but it's still very psychopathic. Imagine if you woke up on a strange island one day. Maybe your plane crashed, and you find this island has some problems. There's even a war going on. Would you then jump straight into action to kill everyone and try to become the new island ruler? Because I know I wouldn't, so why does my character? Every important NPC we end up killing has done nothing to us. Some of them don't seem very nice. For one of them, it seems to be a mercy kill, but most of the time we just travel around looking for people to kill and steal power from. Now, in fairness, they do attack us, but we're the one trespassing into their domain and killing all their men, so we're starting it. The only reason we eventually get for all this is to repair the Elden Ring, but why would we want to do this? I mean, maybe repairing the Elden Ring is a good thing, but maybe it's not, and no one explains to us why it would be. Not all rings are good, just ask Celebrimbor. Now, if it sounds like I'm pedantically picking at unimportant details, then you are at least wrong about the last part. Because pedantic I might be, but these are not unimportant details, they are at the centre of the game's story. From Software have always withheld information and obscured details, but they've never tried to withhold and obscure everything, and Elden Ring is so committed to making everything as vague and confusing as possible that in the process it completely abandons the aspects that made previous games' narratives work, like having a strong central theme, or using obvious and easy to understand imagery and symbolism, or giving the player motivation for their journey, or ensuring the vagueness fits realistically with the setting. For example, in Dark Souls, there is a clear theme of struggle and finding your own way forward in spite of this, as well as death and facing an inevitable end. The imagery and symbolism involve a dichotomy between light and dark, as well as the fading of a flame, and people going hollow, and all of these are easy to understand, even without playing the game, in a way that Elden Rings and Greater Wills are not. The setting is one where most humans have already went hollow, so very few people are even left to explain things to the player, and when you do find someone who knows more than you, they do explain exactly what you should do, how you should do it, and why this is so important. Frampt isn't necessarily telling you the truth, but that's because he has his own motivations and is giving the player this information to try to manipulate them. Elden Ring also has a character who knows a great deal of information that is trying to persuade the player to do their bidding. And this character even travels with you for most of the game. And yet, Melina never explains why you should help her, despite this being something that's obviously in her best interest. I mean, it's not surprising so few players choose one of Melina's endings, as she never bothers to give a single reason why you should. Clearly, this is not out of a lack of commitment to her cause, as she is quite willing to burn herself alive, but I guess telling the player why they should seek the Elden Throne is just too far. I mean, self-immolation is one thing, but a conversation with someone? Yuck. Now, there is a lot of lore in Elden Ring, and I'm not trying to deny that it can be interesting in its own right. In fact, I don't think there has ever been so much lore in any of these games before, but at the same time, I also don't think there has ever been so little reason to care about it. For some people, discovering the lore and trying to piece it together is like a game in itself, and some content creators can produce incredible things out of this, but I still believe that the player's experience within the game itself is the most important part, and that the only reason so many people even looked deeper into the lore of past games was because they felt their actions within the game had meant something. As for the lore, I think some of it deserves credit for being creative and interesting, but it also seems like there is a huge amount of unoriginality. For example, the main revelation in Elden Ring is that the ruling organisation of this land, the Golden Order, has a dark secret, which is that it's being controlled by a secret power, the Greater Will. But this is pretty much the exact same as Demon Souls, and Dark Souls, and Bloodborne, and Sekiro. I don't think the corrupt church is a bad trope, but I do think it's an overused trope, particularly by From Software, who seem to operate as if it's a narrative requirement. However, this twist doesn't work quite so well when we see it in every single game. Likewise, we are once more in a dying world, where the history suggests repeating cycles, where there used to be an age of dragons before humans came along, where the current age is being prolonged, leading to stagnation, where death has again went wrong, leading to no one staying dead, and where there is manipulation of unknowable outer gods. Again, not necessarily bad ideas, but certainly not new ideas either. Still, now that we have breached the topic of lore, I think it's about time the entire Souls community faces up to a hard truth, which is that telling your story through item descriptions is not good storytelling. And if you disagree with me saying that, perhaps you might believe the man who wrote them all, Hidetaka Miyazaki, who said on a Japanese podcast after Dark Souls released that the text is so small that he can't write anything decent and that he kind of gave up with them, saying this wouldn't do for a big title or serious game, but that it was good enough for them. Also, the reason he decided to write them himself as opposed to hiring professional writers was because he was happy to sacrifice quality to allow the game to be developed quicker, and so that he could keep updating them as the game evolved during development. In the end, this turned out well. Maybe Miyazaki was a better writer than he gave himself credit for, and maybe having a single writer allowed for the end result to be more cohesive. Still, I also think this method worked because it just so happened to be a perfect fit for the game. One of the greatest strengths of Dark Souls' story was its minimalism, and putting important lore on item descriptions worked well to complement this precisely because many players wouldn't feel the need to read them all. So in Dark Souls, story never got in the way, and the game's atmosphere, emotion and themes were thus given greater emphasis, all while the lack of direct storytelling was, in a way, able to become a part of the story. Still, none of this means that telling your game's story through item descriptions is itself a good method. The act of reading item descriptions can often be boring, and the questions of who wrote these and how are we managing to read them are simply never addressed. Some games avoid this by creating in-universe books you can read, where their content reflects the knowledge and biases of the author to allow the developers to give players incomplete information in a realistic way. And this is honestly a similar, but superior method. Still, more importantly, just because Elden Ring tells its story through item descriptions does not mean its story is good, and just because this worked in the past is not proof it will always work in the future. If the only way to understand even basic parts of the story, like what are our characters' motivations, is to read every item description, then I think the story has failed somewhere. In Dark Souls, item descriptions worked as they fit with the rest of the game, while allowing those who wanted to dig deeper an opportunity to do so, but Dark Souls wasn't reliant on its item descriptions. Item descriptions didn't exist to create an interest in the story, they existed to reward your interest in the story. And the vagueness of these item descriptions worked well with the game's themes of needing to struggle and find meaning for yourself. A similar argument can be made for Bloodborne, in how a key theme of that game was this impossible search for knowledge in the face of unknowable horror that both the player and the world's other inhabitants experience. Basically,
grant us eyes, grant us eyes, plant eyes on our brains to cleanse our beastly idiocy.
So, in Dark Souls and Bloodborne, being confused about the story is a part of the story. Meanwhile, in Demon Souls and Sekiro, the storytelling is not this vague. In fact, it's not even close. Demon Souls and Sekiro don't spoon-feed the player all information, but they do feature moments of exposition, as well as certain characters speaking plainly to the player about important events and what they mean. So Dark Souls and Bloodborne are vague for a reason, and Demon Souls and Sekiro are not this vague, so why is Elden Ring? I think this is the most cryptic From Software have ever been, but I never found a reason to suggest why this is, and I don't think it works in the story's favour. It's okay to leave players confused, but that shouldn't be the only thing they're left feeling. Anyone can make something that's confusing. It's not a sign that something's deep. Being confusing is the easiest thing in the world. And speaking about confusing, it's time we return to both of the problems raised in the previous section to discuss the side quests. These games have never done much to help players find these unofficial side quests, but in previous games, players were at least likely to travel through these worlds in a predictable order, and so most players were able to find most NPCs and see many of their interactions. It has always been difficult to see everything. Secrets have always been allowed to be secret. But there were plenty of chain NPC interactions most players would see, such as finding Solaire in Lost Izalith, or seeing the confrontation between Pate and Crichton. Elden Ring has more of these side quests than ever before, and I explored the game thoroughly. In previous games, this would mean I was able to see much of this NPC content, but in Elden Ring, I saw almost none, because so many quest lines have such specific requirements, and rely on you going to different places at different times in a way that almost no one would do without following a quest guide. Some of these require you to backtrack to places you've already been, but there's no way to know you should do this, and you can't expect players to regularly backtrack to past locations just to check if an NPC has turned up. Other quests might involve the player being told to do something, which they won't be able to do until many hours later, making it hard to remember the quest even exists. Others need you to exhaust all dialogue, or reload areas to trigger an update. And then there's Blade, attacking you on sight unless you'd bought a specific gesture from a specific merchant who you probably won't find until later, which easily ends both his and Rani's quest before they even begin. If players missed some quests because some were complicated, that would be fine, but if players miss all quests because all are complicated, then it's not fine. Much of this is the result of the open world that prevents From Software from being able to accurately predict the player's path, but they should have been able to predict this problem and implement this content better. Mostly though, this just feels like another example of how these games have come to be designed more and more for players following a wiki or guide, rather than anyone playing the game naturally. After all, it doesn't matter how complicated a side quest is, if players have a guide to tell them what to do. And I assume that is what many players resort to. I mean, you only need to look at the game's achievement statistics to see that something isn't right here. The Age of Stars achievement that is linked to the game's secret ending, something which has so many different requirements that it feels almost impossible to achieve without a guide, has been achieved by more players than all 4 of the normal endings combined. This doesn't just tell us that the majority of players used the guide to achieve the secret ending, it tells us that the majority of players did this on their first playthrough, as that's the only way this achievement could be more common than the others. This is a strange revelation to me. It is understandable that players might want what they feel is the best ending, but I can't help but wonder that if you have to spoil the ending of the game in order to get it, is it still the best ending? Overall though, I think this is just the same thing that's happened with the difficulty, where if you make something too hard, players will just find a way to balance it themselves, even if doing so has some negative consequences on the story.
Indeed.
I don't want to repeat points I made earlier, so I'd like to provide a counterexample instead, to try to illustrate my overarching point in a different way, while also talking about the one area where I think Elden Ring's story does shine, which is how its strong imagery can combine with the exploration in a way to capture the player's imagination, provoking players to think for themselves and experience a sense of awe and wonder at the sights they see and the places they travel to. This was perhaps the main inspiration for Miyazaki's original decision to be so vague in his storytelling, and this, at least, does still work in Elden Ring. So, my highlight of Elden Ring's story, and one of my favourite moments with this game, came at the end of a long stretch of exploration. It started with a map marker. Yes, Elden Ring does have map markers, sometimes. This one was added in a later patch to signpost a new entrance to the underground that's opened after defeating Radahn. The underground already feels like this entirely new world, hidden away beneath the main one, but when exploring this new area, I was lucky enough to spot a message and item that pointed me towards a hard-to-find hidden path, which brought me to another new area that you can jump down to, the aqueduct.
I don't think I can do the
This is
auto
actually the only entrance to this zone, but I didn't know that, and jumping down onto this thin support beam made me feel like I was entering somewhere I wasn't meant to be. Like I was trespassing and going outside the intended game zone. At the end of this area, I found a coffin, which turned out to be a lift, that brought me to another new zone, Deep Root Depths. And then, after some more exploration, I reached the end of this zone. Now, I want you to try to imagine you're me. You entered a hidden underground zone, only to find an even more hidden zone, which took you to another hidden zone, and at this point, you have no idea where you are, or what you'll find, or how this place can be so big. You feel like you've stumbled into an entirely new part of this world that players were never meant to see, a place of mystery and secrets. And at the very end of this journey, you find this. A decaying swamp full of roots and flies with some unknown monstrosity at its centre. You notice a giant fishtail first, and then an oddly angled arm, and something else you can't quite see in the middle, which you eventually realise as you get closer, is a face. Misshapen, oddly angled, sunken and rotting, but a face nevertheless. I know where this is going, you think to yourself. Things like this exist in these games to come alive and attack you. This is a game about boss fights, after all. But that's not quite what happens. Instead, at the foot of this disgusting abomination is a woman. A woman you know.
Ah, there you are. I knew you would come.
Well, that makes one of us, because of all the things I expected to find here in the darkest depths of this world, Fia was not one of them. Fia is the deathbed companion mentioned in the game's opening, and I met her in the Round Table Hold, where she once asked to hold me. She said I felt very warm, and offered to hold me as often as I needed. By the way, she actually permanently decreases your max health by 5% when she does this. What the hell, Fia? I didn't realise I was sharing my vigour quite so literally. I could have done with those hit points against Melania. Anyway, I didn't know this at the time, and I liked Thea. She seemed nice. And here she was, in this place of death and decay, perched beneath this hideous monster, where she asks you this.
What is it you intend? To deny us and our ways, like the dogmatic brutes of the Golden Order?
You know, for somebody who says that Elden Ring is disappointing, he's getting off on a bunch of weird side stuff now. I'm going to get off this one because it's only like 10 minutes from the end, but he started boring me at the end. Thank you, Never Knows Best. I'd like to sub to your channel. I'm just going to go back.
Nice. And
thank you, Never Knows Best. I'd like to sub to your
in this place
channel.
of death and decay,
And
Hi everybody, generic Irish PlayStation man here, and if you can believe it, it's a long video once again. Last time we took a look at the impressive number of games Namco brought to the original PlayStation, games that not only defined the console but established Sony as a serious contender in the console market from the very get-go. There was also a bunch of baseball games in there as well, although if we're going to be making big long lists centered on companies that define the
this video is called the Look at Every Squaresoft PS1 game.
PlayStation, we can only go so long before we talk about Squaresoft, a company not only responsible for some of the console's most legendary and influential titles, but also some of its most interesting and experimental as well. They also made Rad Racer and 3D World Runner on the NES, and look, if your game is immortalized in The Wizard, well then you know your company is only destined for greatness. Now, as I'm sure a lot of you already know, Squaresoft's output during the 16-bit era was probably one of the single greatest runs in video game history. It's almost hard to believe that we got Final Fantasy VI, Seiken Densetsu 3, Live Alive, Super Mario RPG, and Chrono Trigger all in the space of about 2 years. Like, imagine being this good at making video games. All these games, of course, came out for the Super Famicom, and no doubt made Nintendo a whole lot of money. So, in what can long be considered one of the bigger bag fumbles in gaming, when longtime Nintendo partner Square decided to choose the PlayStation over the Nintendo 64, primarily down to Nintendo's decision to stick with carts for their next-gen system over the vastly cheaper and more spacious CD format. Square had grand visions for their games, and more importantly, they also had bucket loads of cash, and if they wanted to make these visions a reality, well then Sony had the console that can make that happen. So how did these games turn out in the end? Well, I think the majority of you already know the answer to that, but in short, if Psygnosis helped establish Sony as a big player in Europe, and Namco helped set the wheels in motion to legitimize the PlayStation brand, well then it was Squaresoft who skyrocketed Sony to the moon. So, as always, I thought it would be fun to run through the entire catalogue of games Squaresoft brought to the original PlayStation. The games that kicked off their legacy on the platform, the games that dared to be a little bit different, the games that pushed the console's power to its very limits, and of course, some of the most legendary and beloved video games of all time, and also all the weird stuff that crept up in between. We're gonna take a look at every single one. So sit back, relax, and get yourself comfy, because it's gonna be a long one as we take a journey all the way back to the year 1996, where once again, the future of computer entertainment is about to change forever. Now, as always, before we dive right in, I'd like to preface this video by stating that the goal here is to simply take a brief look at every game Squaresoft was involved with on the original PlayStation in order of release. You may already be aware that many of the games that we'll be looking at today are quite lengthy story-driven experiences, so naturally a video of this type isn't going to be the most in-depth exploration of these games, but I'll still do my best to give you a nice overview of the experience and what helps make them the classics we all know and love today. Now, by my calculations, there are a grand total of 47 unique games Squaresoft brought to the original PlayStation. Of these 47 games, every single one was released in Japan, unsurprisingly. 28 of these games were released in North America, and depressingly, only 16 of these games were ever released in PAL regions, a number that I'm definitely not bitter about. in the slightest. So if you're surprised to find out that it's my first time trying a game in this list, it's probably because I didn't know it existed for a good portion of my life. Now, just for clarity, this list doesn't take into consideration the various collections and reissues Square have released over the years, 99% of which only ever came out in Japan and they're really, really cool and I want them. But with that being said, some of these collections are a bit more notable than others and also tie directly into today's list, so we'll of course take a look at a few of these throughout the video. And finally, all the footage you'll see today will be the North American versions of these games, unless they were exclusive to Japan, in which case, surprise surprise, we'll be playing the Japanese version. So you can all rest easy in the knowledge that you won't have to suffer any 25 FPS PAL games today. God bless. So let's not waste any more time. We've got 47 games to get through, and what better place to start than with the game that people only bought because it came with a demo for Final Fantasy VII.
Tobal number 1.
Kicking things off with a literal kicking and punching, it's the wonderful Tobal number 1, the first ever Squaresoft game to appear on the PlayStation, launching in Japan in August of the year 1996. Now, it seemed like the basic strategy for most devs looking to make a big splash on a fancy new 3D console was to either make a racing game or a fighting game. Let's just call it the Sega and Namco strategy, if you will. Squaresoft would actually go with the racing route on the PS2 to mixed results, but when it came to the PlayStation, we were gifted with a fighting game, a 3D fighter that aimed to bring something new to an already crowded genre dominated by Virtua Fighter and Tekken, as well as many subpar Virtua Fighter and Tekken clones. Now, Square themselves, not exactly known for making fighting games, but they didn't have to. Instead, Square drafted in a new developer by the name of Dream Factory, a company headed up by one Seiichi Ishii, who was heavily involved in the design of both Virtua Fighter and Tekken, and if Square didn't already seem serious enough, they also got Akira Toriyama on board to handle the character design, something that has worked out quite well for them in the past. Now, Tobal number 1 is an interesting game for a number of reasons, not least of which is the fighting gameplay itself, which, while still a straightforward 3D fighter at its core, does a lot of things to help make it stand out in the genre, even to this very day. While Virtua Fighter uses a simple 3-button system with a button for punch, kick and block, and Tekken kick things up a notch further with individual buttons for right and left kicks and punches, Tobal changes things even further, with buttons now dedicated to positional attacks. One for lows, one for mids, and one for high attacks. Depending on your directional inputs and combo strings, each of these buttons can output a variety of different punches and kicks. There are also individual buttons for both blocking and jumping, which is interesting. It can all feel a little bit odd if it's your first time playing, but it actually goes a long way towards simplifying one of the trickier parts of fighting games, because you always know where your attacks are going to land on an opponent. You hit the high button, it's gonna hit high. You hit low, it's gonna hit low. Now, that's not to say things are dumbed down. Each character has plenty of fun and difficult combo strings and special moves to master that give them their own unique flavor and fighting styles, but the real star of the show when it comes to the fighting has to be the game's grapple system. Like nearly all fighters, Tobal allows you to throw opponents, but what sets it apart is that prior to a throw, you lock into a grapple with your opponent, and depending on your inputs and movements within this grapple, you can actually control the direction that you throw your opponent with a level of precision that's not really seen in most fighting games. It means that if you're near the edge of a stage and you see an opportunity for a ring out, you can grapple your opponent, position them closer, and then throw them in a particular direction to get them out. It not only looks really cool, but it's a serious scumbag move as well, which you know the fighting community is gonna love. You take all these cool new elements, combine them together, and with Tobal you've got an early 3D fighter that not only plays very differently to its contemporaries, but one that actually holds up incredibly well too. Now, the combat itself is a big part of it, but another thing that really sets Tobal apart is how it looks and feels to play. You see, Tobal is one of the more notable games to make use of what's known as the PlayStation's High Resolution Interlace mode, or high-res mode for short. This mode allows games to run with both higher frame rates and higher resolutions, and as a result of this, Tobal number 1's characters and stage elements are made up of untextured polygons to save on memory, but personally I think this gives the game such a striking and distinct look that I genuinely still think looks great even today. The 60 FPS frame rate and super smooth animations also makes the fights look a lot more natural and fluid than what you'd come to expect from a PS1 fighter, let alone one released in 1996. Sure, the stages themselves are a little basic, and the character designs, while pretty fun, certainly aren't Toriyama's most memorable, except for Mary and Nork and Lufu and Oliems the Chicken Man, of course. Okay, I take it back, the characters are actually pretty incredible. But overall, in the style and aesthetic, I think Tobal is one of the coolest and most distinct looking fighters on the platform, hands down. Also, it doesn't hurt that the soundtrack lives up to the lineage of banger fighting game music that came before, by delivering us a collection of tracks from a whole host of Squaresoft and fighting game legends, including Yasunori Manuda, Junya Nakano, and Yoko Shimomura, to name but a few. Meaning this game doesn't just look and play good, it sounds damn good too. Although probably the most famous aspect of Tobal number 1 isn't its 1v1 fighting, it's actually the game's quest mode. This is a Squaresoft game after all, so I suppose it would be rude not to include a hybrid fighting game RPG dungeon crawler, wouldn't it? Now, I'm not gonna lie and tell you that this mode controls very well or that it's overly deep and complex, but for a fighting game in 1996 to include a mode like this at all is absolutely insane. Sure, this first attempt here is a little bit rough and janky at times, but it's still a really fun and charming little inclusion that helps bring the fun of Tobal in the genre. Plus, beating the dungeons are how you unlock bonus classes in the game, and the music also features jungle breaks, so come on, you might as well give it a go. All in all, a very strong showing from Squaresoft and Dream Factory for their debut game on the PlayStation. Maybe not what Squaresoft fans were expecting, but hey, if you bought it for the included Final Fantasy VII demo, well then at least you got yourself a good game with it. A tradition that seems to follow almost every game that somebody purchased because it came with a demo. That is, unless you listen to Power Region, of course, because we didn't get a demo because Final Fantasy didn't even exist here yet. By the way, I should probably also mention that DuckStation, the popular PS1 emulator of choice, recently got support for rollback netcode, meaning Tobal number 1 or practically any fighting game on the console can now be played online at a competitive level. So if anybody out there is looking to pick up a cool new fighter, might I recommend Tobal number 1. Although now that I think about it, you may want to hold on just for a little bit, because this certainly won't be the last we see of Dream Factory on the console, or our old friend Oliems the Chicken Man, for that matter. If you thought our last game was exciting, well, you better buckle your seatbelts because it's Mahjong time. That's right, next up is Pro Logic Mahjong Haishin, a Mahjong game from Squaresoft, or should I say, is it Equate? I'm not really known for pronouncing words properly anyway, so I don't know, just pick your favorite of the two. Aquez is a name that's gonna pop up a few times in this video, and it's basically a short-lived side brand from Squaresoft, dedicated to publishing their more sporty and casual entertainment-focused titles. I guess you can kind of think of them as Square's version of EA Sports, only much less successful, but their games do feature a nice local sequence at least.
Wow. These things suck.
See, that's kind of nice. Anyway, here's Pro Logic Mahjong Haishin, and yeah, it's a Mahjong game, alright? Now, I know it's probably very easy to just dismiss Mahjong games because, like most people from the West, we generally don't have a lot of experience with or attachment to traditional Asian board games. But it is important to remember just how popular these types of games were back in their home country. I'm pretty sure the Japanese PlayStation library features well over 100 different Mahjong games with varying quality, and even if I personally ain't that into them, or even know how to play Mahjong for that matter, it's still important to understand and I suppose respect their place in Japanese games. Of course, that being said, those pro-logic Mahjong do anything interesting or different to set it apart from the usual Mahjong video game? Honestly, not really. From what I've played, this simply seems like a nice, speedy, confident Mahjong video game. It features still images of various people for your opponents, a hefty amount of voice work, and some occasionally nice, if unremarkable ones as well. I guess from an outsider's perspective, I would describe the game as a decent but unremarkable Mahjong experience. If you like Mahjong, well then you'll probably like this game, but don't expect it to convert any newcomers. Now you might wonder to yourself, how could a Mahjong game possibly convert newcomers? And for example, there's a game on the 3DO that's currently being translated into English where you can beat up perverts harassing women by playing Mahjong. See, if you want to get people into Mahjong, this is how you do it. Our first game was 1997, and also the first game to actually be developed by Squaresoft on the console. It's Final Fantasy VII. You might have heard of it. Final Fantasy VII is a difficult game to talk about in a short space of time because it's really hard to really break down just how important and influential this game was, and honestly still is. I mean, we're getting Final Fantasy VII games over 25 years after its release, which is kind of crazy when you think about it. There are people out there who will say it's the greatest video game ever made, and there's probably just as many who consider it overrated schlock, but I suppose, at least for me anyway, I think Final Fantasy VII is one of the examples of a special video game, and while I always really loved this game ever since I was a kid, I don't think I truly appreciated how special it was to me, and how I played the remake all these years later. It's kind of hard to explain. There are parts of me where seeing certain locations or hearing certain songs just elicited such a strong emotional reaction from me, and that's not even down to the quality of the remake, which I think is a pretty good game in its own right, but it was just down to how much I love this game, how much this world means to me, how much I care for these characters, how great this soundtrack is, and I suppose considering my entire video game journey from childhood up until now, how much the game, and I suppose the series as a whole, played a part in shaping the statement video games from Squaresoft. They had just come off making two of the most highly regarded games of the 16-bit era, and to say they were confident in their game-making skills at this stage would be an understatement. Now, Final Fantasy VII had been in the works long before Square even decided it was going to be a PlayStation game. You can find early footage of various tests that they worked on, both in 2D and 3D form, and it was a lot of this experimentation with newer 3D graphic suites that really defined the trajectory of what the game would eventually become. The ability to display game worlds in 3D, and also to make these highly detailed pre-rendered cutscenes, allowed Square to achieve a truly cinematic feel with their games, something that just wasn't possible on previous hardware. Now, despite FF7 being in the works for a number of years, the actual development of the game took just over a year, with a team of roughly 100 to 150 people working on it, which at the time was unheard of for a video game. Not to mention, it was also at the time the most expensive video game ever made until, you know, our Lord and Savior Shenmue came along. Squaresoft put a lot into Final Fantasy VII, and needless to say, it paid off big time, becoming Squaresoft's biggest hit to date. And not only that, it also single-handedly pushed the PlayStation into the lead in Japan. You see, up until early 1997, the Saturn, which, as we all know, struggled a bit in the West, was actually outselling the PlayStation in Japan. That was, of course, until Final Fantasy VII came along and initiated a paradigm shift, which unfortunately Sega would never really recover from. The game also sold a ton in the West, by the way, no thanks down to some serious hype and buzz from the gaming press, and also some very aggressive ad campaigns that infamously spoiled some plot points in the game, but whatever. Look how cool this looked.
A battle between good and evil. A bitter war of love and hate. Final Fantasy VII is the biggest selling game ever on PlayStation, over 100 hours of the most compelling gameplay. This year's most anticipated release is Final Fantasy VII.
By the way, Final Fantasy VII was also the very first mainline Final Fantasy game to ever release in PAL regions, and the buzz for the game was so big over here that they didn't even feel the need to change the name. We just immediately went to number 7, no questions asked. Also, as a side note, while Final Fantasy VII was the first game to feature the Final Fantasy name in PAL regions, it's not the first Final Fantasy game that we got.
What? Come on, you ripped me off,
Final Fantasy Mystic Quest, only strangely with no Final Fantasy branding whatsoever. I guess they were just really trying to make Mystic Quest happen. So that's a little bit of history behind one of the world's most famous games, but what's it all about, you ask? Well, as Final Fantasy VI did before, this entry pushes the series further into the realms of science fiction, giving us a world that feels both futuristic and primitive. Final Fantasy VII follows the adventures of an unpredictable terrorist by the name of Avalanche on their quest to save the planet from the evil Cinder Corporation, who are sucking the planet's life force dry, all in the name of Big Profit, baby. As you can see, it's actually quite ahead of its time, really. There is, of course, a whole lot more to Final Fantasy VII than that, but it isn't the type of
move! Why won't you move? You suck so bad!
That we've got sweet pre-rendered cutscenes and cool eyes and gals with spiky hair and big swords. What more could you want? Now, Final Fantasy VII doesn't actually do a whole lot to change from the established turn-based RPG formula that the Final Fantasy series is known for. Sure, there's a reduction down to a 3-person party versus the usual 4 seen in the previous entries, but for the most part, it's classic turn-based action now just spruced up with fancy 3D visuals. But it's these visuals that really allowed Square to capture the scale and the cinematic elements of combat, from the magic effects to the big imposing enemies, and probably most notably the summon attacks, which can be so spectacular and over the top. They were literally out of this world. Although, probably Final Fantasy VII's defining feature is its materia system. In this game, all your skills, magic, and abilities are contained in items called materia. To use these abilities, you need to slot the materia into your character's weapons and armor. The better your equipment, the more materia you can equip, and the more you use your materia, the stronger your abilities will get. It's a fantastic system that's not only quite easy to understand, but allows for tons of flexibility and combos with your characters, effectively allowing you to spec them in any way you see fit. Although that being said, each character still does have their own individual strengths and weaknesses, and more notably, there's also these attacks called limit breaks, which are basically character-specific super attacks, and another cool addition to the series that began in this entry. Now, if you move outside of the battles and the cool pre-rendered cutscenes, this game was also the introduction of things like pre-rendered backgrounds, the iconic 3D world maps, and these lovable blocky 3D character models that you'll spend the majority of the game looking at. Possibly a throwback to the chibi characters from previous Final Fantasies, but more likely a result of this being Square's first ever 3D game. Quite primitive by today's standards, but I still love them all the same. In fact, one of the strongest parts of these 3D Final Fantasy games isn't the 3D, but the lovely pre-rendered background. Look, I love a good pre-rendered background, and when done well, it can provide a scene or environment with so much charm, detail, and personality in a way that even the most graphically impressive and fully realized gaming worlds can't match. Every location, every building, heck, every room is like a little piece of art. What? And Final Fantasy VII is chock full of these things across its 3 discs. And hey, if you enjoy pre-rendered backgrounds as much as I do, good news, Square tended to feature these things during this era, so expect to see plenty more throughout this video. And of course, while I've probably talked about this game long enough as it is, we can't move on without highlighting its glorious soundtrack from longtime Squaresoft composer Nobuo Uematsu. This is easily one of the most well-known and iconic soundtracks in all of gaming, one that even transcends gaming on its own. In fact, a big reason why I even decided to make this video was because I was playing the recently released Final Fantasy rhythm game Final Barline, and hearing these songs, even just briefly, has this overwhelming power to make you want to play Final Fantasy games. And 7 definitely features some of the best and most memorable tracks this series would ever see.
Ah, wrong one move. Ah, one shot. kill my pet.
Anyway, that's a short look at Final Fantasy VII, one of the most beloved video games of all time, and at least in my opinion anyway, one that's definitely worthy of the praise it receives. I mean, that features Mog's house. Seriously, this is the best shit ever. Now, if you've never tried Final Fantasy VII before and want to check it out for the first time, thankfully it's available on pretty much every modern platform imaginable, now with a bunch of quality of life features, which we love to see. Although when it comes to the original on PlayStation, did you know that there's actually two different versions of Final Fantasy VII? There's the original Japanese release and Final Fantasy VII International. International is basically an updated version of the original game with some bug fixes, gameplay and storyline tweaks.
Nice, one shot.
It's basically the version that we got over here in the West, but was then released again in Japan, so they could benefit from all the adjustments as well. Squaresoft is probably the company most notable for putting out the international releases, but other examples include Capcom's Auto Modelista US tune, which made the game worse, and there's also Sonic Adventure International. So you saw Sonic Adventure on the Dreamcast was janky. Oh boy, you really gotta try that 1998 Japanese original. So this international Final Fantasy VII, based on the Western release, eventually came to Japan in October 1997, roughly 9 months after the original. Now you may think releasing a new and improved version of Final Fantasy VII in Japan, so the original, is kind of a scumbag move, but I mean, what else could you really do back then? Well, I'll tell you what they did do. They sweetened the deal by adding a Japan exclusive port disc known as Final Fantasy VII FFXI. Now this disc has actually one of the coolest bonuses I've ever seen in a video game. It essentially acts as an interactive compendium and guidebook, giving you detailed stats and information on pretty much every single character, enemy, weapon, item, and even location in the game. You can go around a map, click on a location, travel to that location, see what items are inside chests, and even check full lists of every single item a shop is selling. It's kind of amazing, really. The disc also has highly detailed illustrations of items, these insane high-res 3D models of some of the iconic vehicles and machines featured in the game, and you can even watch video clips of every single vehicle, which I legit would have bought this disc for alone. There's even some footage of early versions of the game, which is just so cool to see here all the way back in 1997. If you're a big Final Fantasy VII fan, you can definitely check out the FFXI. Absolutely go ahead and do so. It's a charming and beautifully crafted love letter to Final Fantasy VII. It goes to show just how much effort Squaresoft put into every aspect of their releases. Anyway, that's about enough Final Fantasy VII for one video, I think. I mean, we've only got another, 10 plus Final Fantasy games to get through, and the thing is they probably won't take as long as this one did. But, I mean, come on. It's Final Fantasy VII. Whether you love it or hate it, there's no denying the impact this game had on role-playing games, Squaresoft, the PlayStation. In fact, gaming as a whole is truly one of the all-time greats. Yes, what better time than now? Well, maybe not right
I was
now,
begging you to get off it! You lock me all the time! You lock me in this animation and it drives me crazy, crazy! I hate the developers! I hate them!
And this time, it's Bushido Blade, a new weapon-based fighter, and a debut game from a Japanese developer called Lightweight. Now, its Dream Factory aimed to mix up the traditional 3D fighter formula with
What's this? What?
Bushido Blade throughout the world of pirates, they're doing something completely different. What we have here is a 1v1 weapons-based fighter, but you might notice a few of the usual fighting games like health bars, armors, and actually everything really is missing from it. Bushido Blade gives you a more realistic take on a weapons-based fighter. Just like in real life, one good hit with a sword can take down your opponent in an instant, and you better believe if you slip up, they can do the very same to you. The appeal of Bushido Blade lies in the moment-to-moment gameplay leading up to that one deadly strike. The mind games, the dodges, the parries. What seems like a deceptively simple game on the surface actually offers up a huge amount of depth thanks to the wide variety of options it provides. Not just for slicing up your foes, but for preventing it as well. movement, for the most part, is similar to.
Why would you design the game like that, you worthless piece of shit developer?
You can actually run around freely, which is quite useful and also.
You ever played your own game, or?
So, similarly to Tobal, this game gives you individual buttons for high and low attack. Only this time, the game also adds a stance system, allowing you to lower and raise your center of gravity, which in turn will give you different attack options specific to that stance. So a bunch of additional options like rolls, guards, a complex parry system, the ability to launch limited range weapons, and even the ability to throw sand into your opponent's eyes to blind them temporarily. The best move in all of games. Where things get even more interesting though is that different characters and weapons can change the flow of combat even more. The Shield Blade has a roster of 6 characters, which admittedly doesn't seem like a lot, right? But when you take into consideration the game also gives you a choice of 8 different weapons, from katanas to broadswords and even sledgehammers, and each of these 6 characters also has unique attacks that complement certain weapons, well then as you can see, things really start coming together. Also, it's kind of funny that one of the characters called Black Lotus is an Irish samurai. I did meet a fella.
Why do you stand there?
I think this might have been a different guy. The whole game is such a simple concept, but thanks to a well thought out combat system and wide range of options, it makes every single fight feel tense.
Oh, I'm hammering the keys.
Body damage system where if you wound your opponent but don't kill them, it can take out one of their arms or even leave them crawling around the floor, which actually puts you at a serious disadvantage, but it gives you even more options to stage a dramatic comeback. I mean, it does rarely happen, but still, you never know. It might. Another aspect worth highlighting are the combat arenas themselves. The Shield Blade takes place in modern times, oddly enough. Knowledge environments do have a very traditional feel, making it almost look like it takes place in ancient Japan. Every now and then, things like telephone poles, helipads, or people with literal guns will show up to snap you back into reality. The environment can also sometimes feature ledges and drops that you can scale, and of course fall to your death from, which certainly spices things up. But the best feature of this game, fighting arenas, is the fact that the areas are actually all connected. If you run to the edge of the screen, you and your opponent will then move to another part of the game world. You can keep doing this to your heart's content, by the way. As long as you can exit, you can just keep on running. This will of course probably be very annoying for your opponent, but come on, what's a fighting game without a little VM, right? Otherwise, the game offers up a limited but fun selection. You of course got training and versus mode, and even a nice story mode, which is basically just arcade mode for each of the 6 characters, but does feature some very nice voice cutscenes. A fun little feature in story mode is that you can actually be denied the final fight if at any point you break the Bushido Code of Honor, which basically means any dirty tactics like stabbing a down opponent, throwing a projectile, or a
please let go, let go, let go. Please let go. I shouldn't have to beg.
Blast mode, where you take on 100
you fucking asshole developer. I hate you so much. I hate all of you so much. You do such shitty shit to us all the time. I hate you so much.
Oh yeah, and for the sickos out there, there's also a POV mode you can in 2-player if you link up 2 places. Seriously, somebody out there has got to run a tournament using POV mode only. Come on. Make it happen. So needless to say, I think the Shield Blade is pretty great, and a major part of that is down to its accessible yet complex gameplay. But I think it also comes down to the vibes in a way. The game's lack of a UI and the mysterious low-poly environment go a long way to cultivating a dense atmosphere. Not to mention the actual fights themselves usually feature no music, and it is absolutely the right choice. The ocean or clashing blades echoing in the wind is all you'll ever really need in a game like this.
No, don't die, 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 don't die.
Although that being said, the game does feature a limited amount of music, which was done by the sampling masters of Ridge Racer fame. So somehow this tense and atmospheric fighting game also has an absolute banger soundtrack.
Get out of it! Get out of the water. Please. No, no! What was that? You broke my
For those who
chain,
watch the
you
Namco
fucking
variant
asshole.
of this video,
What was that? You
how big
broke
I
my
am,
chain
I'm
with the
opening
wrong
the
arrow.
pull down
Piece
the
of
one
shit
that you
developers
have
and
an
your
opening,
bad
which
fucking
leave
mouse
that.
wheel
Xenoblade
bullshit
gives
weapon
us one
systems.
hold this
The
opening
suck
to
dick when
any
you can just
fighting
easily
game.
just
We'll
bind
be
keys
setting
to
the
them
stage
and
for
fix
what's
the
to come.
problem. But nah, you gotta suck dick all day in the triple anus and torture us because you're sadist and incompetent. You gotta make me fill my health pack or whatever. I lost my chain. Son of a bitch. I hate you so much. You're so annoying. You're so annoying. I hate this asshole so much. Fucking die. Is he dead?
So, all in
Oh,
all,
God.
I think Bushido Blade is an absolute must-own fighting game on the console. Not only was it incredibly unique for its time,
Hurry up,
but
you.
it managed to remain a standout in the genre.
Where's the
right
other
up
guy? I can't
until
see
this
him.
very day. Squaresoft may not have been making
Where is
the
this
fighting
other
games
guy?
themselves,
Where is
but
he?
clearly they've
Oh,
put
God, there he
two
is.
very impressive teams.
Please don't kill me!
their weight
Don't kill me, don't
finances
kill me.
behind,
Don't kill me,
in the
don't
case
kill
of
me,
that.
don't kill me. Let me go.
Lightweight, they
Let me.
weren't going
Fighting
on
the
console
developers
just
way
yet,
worse
but
than the mob.
we'll have to wait a
Fighting
little
the
while longer to see
developers
how that
so much
turns
worse
out.
than the mob. Shut up for a second. Fighting the developers is so much worse than the fucking mobs. Wish I was kidding.
Hey, would you look at that? We're back to Final Fantasy again, and soon as well. I sure hope you all enjoy seeing the Final Fantasy games out of order. I'm sure that won't get confusing. That's right, hot on the heels of Final Fantasy VII.
I can't see
and
you.
standalone
Watch
port of
the
Super
developers
Nintendo
fight me.
classic Final Fantasy IV, or Final Fantasy II. You're nasty. Now I say standalone because in the West, I'm sure most of you are familiar with this
No,
version coming
no!
out as part of a duo pack, either as part of Final Fantasy Chronicles in North America or with Final Fantasy Anthology in PAL regions, which coincidentally was the debut release
down.
of this game.
Kill
in
her.
PAL. See, Square
Gotta
did
kill her,
care
gotta
about
kill her,
it
gotta kill her,
eventually,
gotta kill her.
in like
Take me out of here,
2002.
take me out of here.
Anyway, since those packages contain
Oh,
other games that
God.
we'll be looking at later, we'll wait until then to talk about
Where's the
it
fire?
proper.
Where's the
But
fire?
For now, here's the PS1 port of Final
no,
Fantasy
stop
IV,
the-
and
where's
it's
the
a
fire?
Super
Get off.
Nintendo game, alright?
Where's the
Except
fire? Where's the fire?
worse somehow.
Where's the fire? Where's the
we'll talk
fire?
more about the quality of the
Oh, God,
port
oh,
and its
God, oh,
new
God, oh,
features
God.
in a moment, but for those unfamiliar, this is Final Fantasy IV,
my
the
God.
fourth mainline entry in the Final Fantasy series, and the first to make it to a 16-bit console, originally launching
Where's
for
the
the
other
Super
one?
Famicom in July 1991. Following in the footsteps of Final Fantasy II, 4 placed a much bigger
damn it.
emphasis
No!
on storytelling, featuring not only a
No!
set cast of named
No!
characters, but this time all with their own unique classes and skill sets as well. Second, the Dark Knight, Cain the Dragoon, Rydia the Summoner.
All the stars are here.
It's true.
Beardy Man.
This was the point where Final Fantasy was beginning to get known for its storytelling
Oh,
just as
thank
much
God
as its
it's
tight
over.
role-playing game.
Stupid ass fucking part. Okay, I've been really worried about that for a while, and I finally got past it. I'm like, okay. Ah, God, what a fucking annoying part, but I beat it. I got it. I'm starting to be able to beat all these games on Extreme, like, no problem, like, pretty consistently. It's hard, but it's, you know, something I can do. So, it is 3 in the morning, guys. This session, as you can see, has been, if Windows was competent, 14 hours and 18 minutes. And so I want to say thank you for hanging out with me for so long. And it was a wonderful session. Got a lot done and everything. Hells yeah, hells yeah. So catch me tomorrow. Catch me outside tomorrow. And we'll have a good day there. I'm looking forward to, to seeing you. I got some pimples on my forehead. I'm sorry. Anyways, yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing you guys, and hope you enjoyed this session. What did we do today? We played some Rust, some EvE, some FFXI, some Elden Ring, and some New World, and some Horizon.